Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are going to do something well, a little dangerous. We are going to open up the hood of your professional brain.
And maybe even your personal decision-making engine.
Exactly. We're going to take a look at the machinery inside, and I have to warn you, what we find in there, it might be a little disturbing. You know that old definition of insanity? The one that gets thrown around in every single corporate retreat?
Oh, yeah, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Right. It's usually attributed to Einstein, though I think that's probably not true.
Historians are still fighting about that one, yeah.
Yeah.
But the point stands.
It does. And we all nod sagely when we hear it. We think, yes, of course, don't be insane. But then Monday morning hits. The quarterly review lands on your desk. And what do? We double down.
We always double down.
If a product launch fails, the immediate reaction is, we didn't market it hard enough. If the team culture is toxic, the answer is, we need to send more memos about collaboration.
Or we need a new values poster for the break room.
Yes. We do the exact same thing, just harder, faster, and with a lot more stress.
Because the alternative, the real alternative is admitting that the map we're using to navigate is it's wrong. And that is a genuinely terrifying thought for most people, especially successful people.
Why is that so scary?
Well, it's much easier to blame your own effort. I didn't work hard enough, or my team didn't execute perfectly, than it is to blame the fundamental model you're using to understand the world. Because if the model's wrong, everything you've built on it might be shaky.
And that is exactly where we are going today. We are diving deep into a book that is, well, it's essentially a demolition crew for your professional assumptions. It's called A New Way to Think by Roger L. Martin.
And we should be really clear for you listening. Roger Martin isn't just some academic hypothesizing from an ivory tower.
Not at all. Far from it.
This is the former dean of the Rotman School of Management, which is a big deal. But more importantly, he's been the strategic advisor to the CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world. We're talking Procter & Gamble, Lego, Ford, Four Seasons.
So he's been in the room.
He has been in the room where the billion-dollar decisions are made, often when those companies are in deep, deep trouble. This book is basically his career retrospective. It's a collection of the 14 biggest aha moments he's had while trying to fix these broken companies.
The premise is simple, but I would say it's pretty brutal. He argues that most managers, and honestly most of us in our daily lives, are operating with what he calls broken models.
Right, these dominant frameworks for how we think the world works.
Things like business is war or data is king. We just assume they are true, like gravity. But Martin says they aren't just slightly off. In many cases, they are actively destroying value.
He doesn't pull any punches. He identifies 14 of these common dominant models. He explains precisely why they're broken, using data and logic, and then he methodically swaps them out for 14 superior alternatives.
So our mission today is an audit, a full mental model audit. We are going to walk through the big ones from the book, and I really want everyone listening to ask yourself honestly, am I guilty of this? Is this the tool I'm reaching for without even thinking?
It's going to be a bit of an exorcism for bad business habits.
I like that. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Why do we even have these models in the first place? Why can't we just look at every single problem with fresh eyes?
Because you die of exhaustion by lunchtime. I mean it. The human brain is an efficiency machine above all else. We are, at our core, cognitive misers.
Real lazy thinkers.
We have to be. Imagine if you had to derive the laws of physics from first principles every time you took a step. You'd never leave your chair. You can't analyze the chemical composition of your toothpaste every morning to decide if it's the best one.
So we use shortcuts, heuristics.
Exactly. Models. If X happens, then I should do Y. It's a rule of thumb. If sales are down, cut costs. If you want to build customer loyalty, offer a points program.
They become received wisdom.
Yes, and then they get baked into the corporate culture as standard operating procedures or SOPs. The problem isn't that we use models. We have to use them to function. The problem is when we forget they're just tools and start treating them as absolute truths with a capital T.
Martin brings up the philosopher Karl Popper here, right? Falsificationism, which sounds like a very academic mouthful, but the idea behind it is actually really practical.
It's incredibly practical. Karl Popper was a philosopher of science, and his big idea was this. You can never, ever prove a theory is true forever. It's impossible. You can only prove that it hasn't been proven false yet.
Okay.
So Martin says, treat your business models like scientific theories. Use the model of economies of scale or stick to your knitting for as long as it works. But the minute it stops working, the minute the data comes back and contradicts the model, you have to be ready to drop it.
And the key is, don't blame yourself. Blame the model.
That's the revolutionary part. You fire the model.
I love that phrasing. Fire the model. It takes all the ego out of it. It's not, I failed as a manager. It's, this wrench is broken. It's time to find a hammer.
Precisely. And today, we're going to be firing a lot of models.
All right, let's get into it. Part 1, the context of business. This is the big picture stuff, the framing. And the very first model on the chopping block is one that I think 99% of business people believe deep in their bones: competition.
The business's war model.
Absolutely. We read Sun Tzu's The Art of War. We talk about killing the competition. We visualize the entire market as this giant battlefield where Coke is locked in mortal combat with Pepsi and Airbus is in a constant dogfight with Boeing.
It's a very, very seductive narrative, isn't it? It makes CEOs feel like five-star generals. It makes the employees feel like troops in a noble cause.
It's motivating in a way.
It can be, but Martin's argument is that this model is dangerously distracting because if you are obsessed with the enemy army across the field, you are completely ignoring the one person who actually decides if you live or die.
The customer.
Think about it from your own perspective. When you are in the shampoo aisle at the grocery store and you're staring at this wall of 20, 30 different bottles, are you really thinking, I wonder how Procter & Gamble's fourth quarter earnings are stacking up against Unilever's global market share today?
Definitely not. No. I'm thinking, my hair feels dry, this bottle smells like coconut, and it's on sale for $6. That's the entire thought process.
Exactly. You, the customer, do not care about the corporation. You care about the product in front of you. The competition doesn't happen in the boardroom. It doesn't happen in the head office. It happens at the front line.
On the shelf.
On the shelf, on the website's landing page, at the hotel check-in desk. That single point of interaction is where the customer makes a choice. That's the only battle that matters.
Okay, I see the point, but couldn't you argue that's just semantics?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, the customer buys the product on the front line, but it's the headquarters that designs and builds the product. The generals are the ones who direct the troops.
But that's the trap. That's the old model thinking. If you truly accept that the win happens at the front line, then the entire purpose of the corporate hierarchy has to flip upside down.
What do you mean, flip?
In the traditional military-style model, the front line exists to serve the boss. The troops follow the general's orders. In Martin's new model, the hierarchy exists only to serve the front line.
Meaning, if the head office isn't actively helping that bottle of shampoo win on the shelf, then the head office shouldn't exist.
That is the net value test, and it is a brutal, unforgiving standard. Every single layer of management adds cost. It's not just the salaries of the VPs and their assistants.
It's their offices, their travel, their retreats.
And more importantly, it's the bureaucracy they create. They demand reports, they slow down decision-making, they add complexity. Martin calls this a tax on the organization.
So the fundamental question becomes, does that layer of management add more value to the layer below it than the tax it extracts in cost and bureaucracy?
Precisely. Martin uses his time consulting for P&G to illustrate this perfectly. P&G is, a massive, sprawling company. You have the individual brand, like Pantene, then that reports up to the category hair care, which reports to the sector beauty care, which reports to corporate. That's a lot of layers.
That is a lot of tax.
A huge tax. So the question Martin posed to the CEO, A.G. Lafley, was this. Does the beauty care sector make it easier or cheaper or faster for the Pantene brand to win on the shelf? Does being part of this big P&G structure give Pantene a superpower it wouldn't have if it were just a standalone independent company?
And the standard answer from any big company would be synergies.
Right.
We share resources, we have economies of scale.
Of course, but synergy is often just a pretty lie we tell ourselves to justify corporate empire building. P&G had to look really, really hard at this. They did a deep dive and realized that their core competency, their actual corporate superpower, was in very specific chemical technologies. Things like surfactants, the chemistry of cleaning.
Okay, so that superpower applies to laundry detergent, like Tide.
And shampoo, like Pantene, and dish soap, like Dawn. For those brands, being part of P&G provided a real, tangible advantage. The corporate R&D was a superpower.
P&G also owned a lot of other stuff.
They owned Pringles, Potato chips. They own Folgers Coffee. They had a massive pet food business with Iams.
I totally forgot Pringles was a P&G brand.
For a long time, they were. Now, apply the net value test. Does knowing the chemistry of getting grass stains out of a t-shirt help you make a tastier potato chip?
I would certainly hope not.
Right. So the corporate layer at P&G was extracting cost from the Pringles brand-demanding reports, enforcing corporate HR policies, but it wasn't adding any unique value that helped Pringles win against Lay's. Pringles was effectively paying a tax for no benefit.
It was subsidizing the bureaucracy.
Yes. So even though Pringles was a profitable billion-dollar brand, P&G sold it. They sold Folgers, they sold their pet care division, they shed dozens of brands.
That is radical. Most CEOs are obsessed with getting bigger, with empire building, not getting smaller.
Because most CEOs are operating on the business as war model, where size equals strength. Martin is operating on the competition happens at the frontline model. And in that model, if the general isn't helping the soldier aim their rifle better, you need to get the general off the battlefield.
That is such a powerful filter. Only keep what you can uniquely help. Okay, let's move to the second pillar of context. Stakeholders. Who are we actually doing all this for?
This one is This is basically the third rail of American capitalism.
What?
Since about 1976, we have lived in the era of what's called shareholder value theory.
Milton Friedman.
Milton Friedman, Michael Jensen, a lot of economists from the Chicago School. The idea is that the sole moral and economic purpose of a corporation is to maximize wealth for its shareholders. Period.
And the logic, as I understand it, is that if you make the shareholders rich, they will reinvest that money, efficient markets will allocate the capital, and that becomes the engine of the entire economy. It creates jobs, it creates wealth for everyone.
That's the theory. A very clean, elegant theory. But Martin points out a massive, glaring paradox at its heart.
Which is?
The best way to destroy long-term shareholder value is to become obsessed with short-term shareholder value.
Okay, wait, walk me through that. That sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
If I wake up every single morning with the goal of raising the stock price, shouldn't the stock price go up?
You would think so. But you have to ask yourself, what actually is a stock price? It's not a report card on what your company did yesterday. It's a collective bet made by millions of people in the market on what your company is going to do tomorrow, next year, and 10 years from now.
It's based on expectations of future earnings.
Exactly. It's all about expectations. Now, here's the problem. Managers cannot actually control the future. They can influence it, but they can't control it. But if their bonus, their job, their entire reputation is tied to that daily stock price, they feel this immense pressure to control those expectations.
To manage the market's perception.
To massage the numbers. So what do? They engage in rampant short-termism. They slash the R&D budget to make this quarter's earnings look a few cents better. They postpone a factory upgrade. They buy back their own shares to artificially inflate the earnings per share number. They raise prices and degrade the product quality to squeeze out another penny of margin.
They eat the seed corn to look good today.
They eat the seed corn to satisfy the Wall Street beast today, completely starving the harvest of tomorrow. And the data actually proves this has been a disaster. Martin compares the managerial era, say from the 1930s to 1976, when CEOs saw themselves as stewards balancing the needs of customers, employees, and the community, against the shareholder era from 1976 onward.
And what was the result?
The total real returns to shareholders in the S&P 500 were roughly the same in both eras. All this obsession over shareholders didn't actually make shareholders richer in the aggregate. It just made corporations more volatile, less innovative, and less focused on their actual reason for existing.
Which is?
To serve a customer. So what's the better model? It's simple. Put the customer first, explicitly. If you obsess over creating a product that your customer loves, if you serve them better than anyone else on the planet, you will generate real revenue, real profit. And guess what? The shareholders will get fantastically rich as a result of that focus, not as the object of it.
It's the Johnson & Johnson approach.
The J&J Credo is the classic example. It was carved in stone literally in their headquarters back in the 1940s. It lists their priorities in order. Priority number 1, the doctors, nurses, patients, mothers, and fathers who use their products.
And where are the shareholders?
Priority number 4, dead last.
And that's not just a nice plaque on the wall for PR. They proved they meant it.
They proved it in the most extreme way possible. The Tylenol crisis of 1982. This is the gold standard taught in every business school. 7 people in the Chicago area died after taking Tylenol capsules that had been laced with cyanide.
And it wasn't a factory error.
Yeah.
It was a third-party criminal who had tampered with bottles in the drugstores.
Exactly. So technically, J&J wasn't legally liable. A shareholder-first CEO would have done the cold calculation. A full national recall will cost us $100 million. The stock will tank. Let's just do a targeted recall in Chicago, put out some press releases, and try to write it out.
Right. Minimize the immediate financial hit.
But James Burke, the CEO at the time, didn't do that. He went back to the credo. Our first responsibility is to the patients. He ordered an immediate nationwide recall of every single bottle of Tylenol in the country. 31 million bottles.
Which must have been a huge financial hit.
Massive. It cost them a fortune. The stock dropped like a rock. The media declared the Tylenol brand dead forever.
Yeah.
But the public saw a company that was willing to sacrifice its own profit to protect their safety. The trust that action generated was immeasurable. J&J re-released Tylenol in tamper-proof packaging, and it came back stronger than ever. And over the long run, J&J stock has been one of the best performers in history.
Because they focus on the game, not the scoreboard.
That's a perfect way to put it. Martin also cites Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever. When he took over, he famously told Wall Street analysts, "We are stopping all quarterly earnings guidance. We are going to focus on long-term innovation and sustainability. If you are a short-term investor who doesn't like that, I respect you, but please sell our stock."
That is such a boss move, for lack of a better term. You're essentially firing your short-term shareholders.
He was curating a shareholder base. He was telling the world he only wanted investors who believed in the long game. And what happened? The stock went up 266% during his tenure.
Okay, so the new model is focus on the customer above all else. But that brings us to the third model. How should we even think about that customer? The old model is all about loyalty.
Oh, marketers are completely obsessed with loyalty. We use this very romantic language. We want brand love. We want our customers to have a relationship with our brand of soap. We measure Net Promoter Score to see how many promoters we have.
And, that feels right. I have brands I feel loyal to. I buy the same brand of toothpaste every single time.
Okay, but let's do a gut check on that. Are you buying it because you are deeply emotionally attached to the specific chemical formulation of Crest? Do you feel a sense of kinship with the brand? Or do you buy it because it's there, it's familiar, it works fine, and you simply do not want to think about toothpaste?
Okay, when you put it that way, it's 100%, because I don't want to stand in the aisle for 10 minutes reading the claims on 20 different boxes.
Exactly. Martin argues that what we call loyalty is, in almost all cases, just plain old habit. It's laziness. And I don't mean that as an insult to the customer. It's a feature of the human brain.
The brain craves automaticity.
It craves it. Thinking costs energy. Making decisions literally burns glucose. Your brain is designed to preserve energy whenever possible, so if it can create an automatic habit loop, it will.
We're all just looking for the path of least resistance.
Martin uses a great term for this: processing fluency. How easy is it for my brain to recognize and choose this product? If a laundry detergent bottle is bright orange, like Tide, and it's always in the same spot on the shelf, and I've bought it 100 times before, the cognitive cost of choosing it again is near zero. It's a reflex.
And that creates a huge barrier to entry for any competitor.
A massive one. He calls it cumulative advantage. Every time you buy Tide, that neural pathway in your brain gets a little wider, a little faster. It becomes the default. The danger comes when companies mistake this powerful habit for genuine love and affection.
Give me an example of a company making that mistake.
The classic one is Instagram. A while back, they did a massive redesign. They changed their iconic retro camera lens logo to a flat, simple, colorful gradient. They changed the user interface.
They wanted to freshen up the brand.
Yes, they thought, our users love us. They'll be so excited for this new look. They assumed they had deep loyalty.
And instead, everyone absolutely revolted. The internet was on fire.
People were furious. And it wasn't because they had a deep artistic appreciation for the old skeuomorphic design of the camera lens icon. It was because Instagram broke their habit loop. Their thumb knew exactly where to go on their phone screen. Suddenly, the button moved. The colors changed. It was disorienting.
You forced their brains to switch from autopilot to active processing.
You made them think, and the brain hates unnecessary thinking. Compare that to MySpace, which constantly allowed users to change their layouts into chaotic, music-blasting messes. It was novel, but never habit-forming.
Whereas Facebook's rigid consistency built a worldwide addiction.
Exactly. So the lesson for any business is don't change for the sake of freshness. If you have a winning habit loop, protect it with your life. If you absolutely have to innovate, do it gently. Bridge the old habit to the new one.
Like Netflix.
Netflix is the perfect case. They moved their entire customer base from DVD by mail, a huge habit, to streaming. But they kept the red branding, they kept the subscription model, they kept the feel of the brand. They guided the customer from one habit to the next without causing that jarring break.
That's a huge shift in mindset. Stop trying to make customers love you. Just make it incredibly easy for them to choose you without thinking.
Be the familiar default solution.
Okay, let's move into the engine room, part 2, making choices. This is all about strategy and data. And this is where I think Martin gets really technical, but also really, really interesting. Let's start with strategy.
The word strategy has been so abused over the years. For most people, strategy is just the plan.
Or the big heavy binder that gets created once a year and then sits on a shelf collecting dust.
Exactly. The traditional model of creating strategy is purely analytical. You gather massive amounts of data. You analyze the market size, the competitors' moves, the macroeconomic trends. You ask the fundamental question, what is true? And then you try to extrapolate that truth into the future.
Which, on the surface, sounds perfectly reasonable. You should base your decisions on facts, on what is true.
The problem is, facts are, by definition, about the past. What is true only describes the world as it was yesterday. Strategy is about creating tomorrow. And you cannot analyze data from the future because it doesn't exist yet.
So if you only rely on analysis of the past,
You end up making very safe, incremental choices that just kind of repeat the past with slight variations. It's the lazy person's approach to choice, as Martin calls it. It feels rigorous, but it's actually an abdication of imagination.
so how do you break out of that trap?
You have to fundamentally change the question. Instead of asking, what is true, you must ask, what would have to be true?
Explain that difference. What would have to be true?
It's a shift from a data test to a logic test. It comes from the scientific method. You start with a possibility, a hypothesis, and then you work backwards to figure out what conditions would need to exist in the world for that possibility to succeed. The Olay example from the book is the perfect illustration of this.
Okay, let's get into it.
Right, so back in the 90s, Olay was oil of Olay. It was this pink, kind of greasy fluid in a cheap plastic bottle. It was seen as an old lady brand. It was sold in drugstores and supermarkets for just a few dollars. P&G knew they needed to reinvent it to grow.
So what were their options?
Well, the traditional analysis would point to option A, make it even cheaper and fight a price war with the generic store brands. But a more imaginative group inside P&G had option B. What if we tried to make Olay a prestige brand? What if we launched a high-end, scientifically advanced cream?
But prestige brands are sold in fancy department stores, like Clinique or Estee Lauder. Olay is in Walmart and Walgreens.
Exactly. The data was crystal clear. You cannot sell a $20 face cream in a mass-market drugstore. The analysis of what is true would have told you drugstore shoppers are price-sensitive and buy cheap stuff. The idea would have been killed immediately.
So the analytical approach was a dead end for innovation.
Dead on arrival. But instead, they used the what would have to be true model. They said, okay, let's imagine we did launch a high-end cream in Walmart. What conditions must exist in the world for that to be a winning strategy?
Okay, so what were some of those conditions?
Well, first, the product itself has to actually be better than the cheap stuff. The packaging has to look and feel premium. But the most critical, uncertain condition was the price point. The price had to do two completely contradictory things at once.
Which were?
It had to be low enough that a Walmart shopper could still afford it, but it also had to be high enough to signal this is a serious luxury quality product.
The price itself becomes a piece of
A
marketing.
critical piece. So they didn't just guess, they went out and tested that one barrier condition. They put the new cream on shelves in test markets at different price points. At $12.99, it sold okay, but people treated it like any other regular drugstore product.
It was too cheap to feel special.
Exactly. Then they tried $15.99. And sales actually dropped. It was in this horrible dead zone. It was too expensive for the budget shopper, but it wasn't expensive enough to convince the person who might normally buy a prestige brand that it was a credible alternative.
And then?
Then they tried $18.99, and sales exploded.
Wait, they raised the price and sold more product.
Yes. Because at $18.99, the consumer looked at the package and said, wow, this is almost $20. This must be the real deal. But hey, the cream I was looking at in Macy's is $30, so this is actually a brilliant steal.
Okay.
The $18.99 price point satisfied the logic condition perfectly,
It signaled quality and value at the same time.
which is something that no analysis of historical sales data ever would have told them. They had to imagine a possibility first and then use data to test the logic of that future.
This leads us directly into the bigger problem with data. We live in the age of big data. Data-driven decision-making is a phrase on every resume and in every boardroom. But Martin issues a huge warning against this.
He creates a distinction that I think is just brilliant. He separates the world into two domains, Aristotle and design.
Aristotle versus design.
The world of Aristotle represents science. It's the world of immutable laws, gravity, thermodynamics, the boiling point of water. In the world of Aristotle, the past perfectly predicts the future. If I drop a pen 100 times, it will fall 100 times. You can and should use data to prove it.
Okay. And the world of design.
Design is the world of human invention and human behavior. It is malleable. It changes. Just because humans have acted one way in the past does not mean they will continue to act that way in the future if you present them with a new choice or a new motivation.
So the fundamental mistake is applying Aristotelian logic, it has always been this way, so it must always be this way, to problems of human design.
That is the trap, and the Lego story from the book is the perfect example of escaping that trap. For years, Lego was really struggling. They looked at all their sales data and saw a very clear, compelling fact. 85% to 90% of their users were boys.
And the Aristotelian, data-driven conclusion from that would be, girls don't like Lego.
Right. It's a biological fact. Girls are neurologically different from boys. The data proves it. They treated this observation as if it were a law of nature, like gravity. Girls don't build.
But it wasn't gravity. It was just bad design for half the population.
Exactly. The new CEO, Jürgen Vig Knudstorp, took a design approach. He didn't ask, is it true girls don't play with Lego? He asked, how can we inspire girls to play? They did deep ethnographic research. They observed how girls actually played.
And what did they find?
They found that boys often tended to like the standalone, conflict-based narrative, I am the hero, I built the castle, I'm defending it. The girls in their research, on the other hand, tended to gravitate more toward collaborative play, role-playing with characters, and building community scenes.
So the problem wasn't the brick itself. It was the story you were telling with the brick.
Precisely. So they launched a new product line called Lego Friends. The little minifigures were slightly different, less blocky. The sets were designed around community interaction, a cafe, a veterinarian's clinic, a house. And the color palette was different.
And the data purists and the longtime fans probably hated it.
Oh, they screamed bloody murder. You're dumbing it down. You're pandering to stereotypes. But Lego Friends became one of the most successful new product launches in the company's entire history. It brought millions and millions of girls into the Lego ecosystem.
And proved the original data wrong.
It proved that the data girls don't play with Lego was just evidence of a failed strategy from the past, not an immutable rule for the future.
Data is evidence of the past, not a rule for the future. That is a sentence every single person listening needs to write down on a Post-it note and stick on their monitor.
Especially if you're trying to do anything innovative. If you require historical data to prove that a new idea will work, you will never, ever launch a truly new idea. Because by definition, there is no data for something that is new. Imagination has to lead, and data has to follow.
Let's move to part 3, structuring work. So we've got the right context, we're making better choices with strategy and data. Now, how do we organize the actual humans who do the work? Let's talk about that fuzzy, difficult word, culture.
Ah, culture. The thing that every CEO wants to fix, and almost none of them know how. We need a winning culture. We need to be more like a startup.
And typically they try to fix it with a memo, or a big all-hands town hall meeting, or my personal favorite, moving all the desks around to create an open plan office to foster collaboration.
And it almost never works. Martin's core argument is that culture isn't something you can command from on high. Culture is the cumulative result of the thousands of tiny micro-interactions that happen between your employees every single day.
It's the unwritten rule book.
It's the unwritten rule book in your employees' heads that tells them how to act in order to survive and succeed in this specific organization.
How to survive, that's a really key phrase.
It's everything. If the official memo from the CEO says, we must all collaborate, but the bonus structure handsomely rewards individual sales performance, the culture will be fiercely competitive. The survival mechanism, how I get paid, always, always overrides the memo.
So if you can't change it with a memo, how do you change it?
You have to change the micro interactions. You have to change the specific day-to-day habits of how people talk to each other. Martin gives a fantastic example from his time when he first became dean of the Rotman School of Management.
Which, by his telling, was a bit of a snake pit when he arrived.
A deeply toxic culture of complaint and backbiting. Faculty members would constantly come to his dean's office to badmouth other faculty members. Professor Smith is stealing my research, students. Professor Jones was rude in the faculty meeting.
Classic triangulation.
Exactly. It's telling mom that dad is being mean. It creates factions and destroys trust. Now, the old way to handle this would be for Martin to send a stern email saying, everyone needs to be more professional.
Which would have been read, deleted, and ignored within 5 minutes.
Immediately. Instead, he changed the fundamental interaction. He announced what he called the Campaign for Adult Behavior. The rule was simple. If you came to his office to complain about a colleague, he would listen politely and patiently.
Okay.
And then when you were finished, he would stand up and say, thank you for sharing that with me. We are now going to walk together down the hall to that person's office, and you are going to repeat exactly what you just said to me to their face, with me in the room as a silent witness.
Oh, the horror. The sheer crippling social awkwardness.
Imagine it. I would die on the spot.
I would simply evaporate.
And that was the entire point. He dramatically raised the cost of complaining. Before, complaining was free. It felt good. It let off steam. Now, complaining carried a very high, very awkward price. Direct confrontation.
So what happened?
The complaints stopped. Almost overnight. Or, to be more accurate, people started resolving their own conflicts directly with each other because it was way less awkward than getting the dean involved. By changing one single micro habit, we don't talk behind backs, we talk to faces, he completely rewired the survival guide of the entire institution.
Wow. He didn't change the org chart. He didn't change the bonus plan. He changed the hallway dynamic.
And that's all it took. You see the same thing with A.G. Lafley at P&G. Strategy review meetings used to be pure theater. A brand manager would come in with a 100-page PowerPoint deck. They'd stand at a podium at the front. The CEO and senior leaders would sit in rows in the back like judges.
It was a defense, a negotiation.
That's a performance. Here is my presentation on why my numbers are right. Please don't cut my budget or fire me.
Wait.
Lafley changed the furniture. Literally. He got rid of the podium and put in round tables. He banned PowerPoint decks. He said, just write me a simple 3-page memo outlining the problem you're trying to solve.
And the meeting became a conversation.
It shifted the entire dynamic from a negotiation to a conversation. The question changed from, are your numbers right, to what are you struggling with, and how can we, as a leadership team, help you solve it?
That requires the leader to be vulnerable, too. They have to admit they don't have all the answers.
It absolutely does. But it changed the P&G culture from one of hide the truth to survive to one of surface the problem so we can win, all by changing a meeting format.
Let's talk about the nature of work itself, especially for those of us in knowledge work. This is most of the people listening. We aren't tightening bolts on an assembly line. We're writing code, designing marketing campaigns, managing teams. But Martin says we are still managed like we're factory workers.
We are completely stuck in the job model, the 9 to 5. The underlying assumption is that because a factory worker needs to be physically present at the machine for 8 hours to produce 8 hours of widgets, a knowledge worker needs to be sitting at their desk for 8 hours to produce 8 hours of a wettable. Thoughts?
But thinking isn't linear, it's lumpy.
Exactly. That's the perfect word for it. Sometimes you have a breakthrough insight in the shower and you do a week's worth of strategic work in 10 minutes. Other times you are just waiting for data or for someone else to finish their part. But the job model demands that you look busy for 40 hours a week.
And so what happens when you aren't actually busy, but you have to look busy to justify your salary?
You create what Martin calls the decision factory. It's a brilliant term. If I'm a middle manager with downtime, I'm not going to sit and stare at the wall. That looks bad. I'm going to call a meeting. I'm going to request a new report from my team. I'm going to write a very long, very detailed email to a bunch of people.
You generate work to justify your own existence.
And that work then creates more work for other people. Now they have to stop what they're doing to prepare for your meeting and write your report. The entire system gets clogged with this bureaucratic sludge, this performative work that doesn't actually add value.
So what's the alternative?
Martin suggests we need to move away from jobs and toward a project model of work.
The Hollywood model.
Yes. Think about how a movie gets made. You don't have a permanent salaried staff of best boys and key grips and cinematographers just sitting around at Paramount Studios waiting for a movie to happen. You have a project, say, the next Mission Impossible. You assemble a world-class team of experts for that specific project. They work together intensely for 6 or 12 months. You finish the movie.
And then the team disbands and everyone flows to their next project.
It's a fluid flow-to-the-work system. Instead of the mindset being, I own this desk and this job title for 20 years, it becomes, I am currently deployed on the Tide relaunch project. When that's done, maybe I get deployed to a sustainability initiative or a new market entry team.
That sounds incredibly chaotic for a traditional HR department to manage, though.
It's definitely harder to manage than a rigid org chart, yes. But the benefit is that it virtually eliminates the destructive binge and purge hiring cycle that plagues so many big corporations, where they hire frantically during a boom and then have massive soul-crushing layoffs during a bust. A project-based organization is much more flexible and resilient.
Speaking of HR, let's talk about the corporate functions. HR, IT, finance, legal. The departments everyone loves to hate.
They're usually seen as either the servants or the dictators.
Right. Either they are completely servile, we will do whatever the business unit wants, which leads to total chaos, no standardization, and duplicated effort, or they are imperial. We are the policy police. You must fill out Form 302B in triplicate, or you get nothing.
Martin says both of those models are fundamentally broken because they treat the function as a necessary evil, as a cost center. He argues that every function needs to have its own strategy. They need to ask the same two questions as the CEO. Where will we play, and how will we win?
Give us the Four Seasons example here. I think this really makes the idea concrete.
Right. So Four Seasons is a luxury hotel chain. Their overall corporate strategy, their unique way of winning the market, is exceptional personalized service. Not just, we have fancy sheets, but service that feels intuitive and magical.
Okay, that's the corporate strategy.
So the HR department didn't just ask, how do we fill these job openings for maids and bellhops as efficiently as possible? That would be the servile cost center model. They asked a strategic question. How can we, in HR, help Four Seasons win on its promise of service?
And what was the answer?
They realized you can't really train someone to be a genuinely nice, caring person. You can teach them the technical skills of how to make a bed perfectly, but you can't teach them to have the right heart. So HR decided their winning strategy was to hire for attitude and then train for skill.
Which sounds like a bit of a cliche that every company says.
It does, until you see how they actually executed it. They mandated a minimum of 5 separate interviews for every single position in the hotel, even a housekeeper, even a dishwasher.
5 interviews for a dishwasher. From a purely efficiency standpoint, that seems insane. It's incredibly costly.
In the short term, yes, it costs a lot of management time. But they weren't optimizing for cost. They were optimizing for their strategic advantage. They needed to weed out every single person who could technically do the job but didn't have that innate spark of hospitality. So by the time someone actually gets hired at a Four Seasons, they feel chosen, they feel special, and that feeling translates directly into how they treat the guests.
So HR wasn't just a support function filling slots.
They were the primary guardians and enablers of the entire corporate strategy. That is a total reframe. A function isn't support, it's a strategic weapon.
All right, part 4. Key activities. We are in the home stretch now. This is about the daily grind of business. Planning, execution, talent, innovation, and capital. Let's start with the one that personally drives me crazy. Strategic planning.
The great corporate oxymoron.
Martin says strategic planning is a fundamental contradiction in terms. Why?
Because planning and strategy are polar opposite activities. They engage different parts of your brain and deal with different parts of the world. Planning is about the supply side of your business. It's about the resources you completely control.
Like costs.
Costs, where you build your next factory, how many people you hire. If you sign the check, it happens, it's controllable, it's comfortable, it lives nicely in a spreadsheet.
Okay, that's planning. What's strategy?
Strategy, on the other hand, is about the demand side. It's about revenue. It's about customers. And here is the scary, uncomfortable truth. You do not control the customer. You cannot plan for them to buy your product. You cannot order them to choose you over a competitor.
You could only try to entice them.
To persuade them.
Exactly. So strategy is not a plan. It's a bet. It's a gamble. It's an educated guess.
Right.
It's saying if we make the specific set of choices, we believe the customer will respond in this way. But you can't ever prove it in advance.
And the problem is that most corporate strategic plans are really just budgets in disguise. They're 99% plan. They are incredibly detailed spreadsheets of costs with a single unexamined revenue number at the bottom that just magically goes up by 5% every year. That's not a strategy. Martin calls it a wish.
So what's the fix?
You have to bifurcate them. You have to separate them entirely. Have a rigorous, detailed plan for your costs and resources. But for strategy, you have to admit that you are making choices under uncertainty. You have to admit that you don't know for sure. Martin has a great line. If you are entirely comfortable with your strategic plan, it's probably a bad plan.
Because that comfort means you're only focusing on the things you control, and you're ignoring the scary, uncertain reality of the market and the customer.
That's it. Real strategy requires angst. It requires the courage to say, we are choosing to do A, which means we are actively choosing not to do B, C, and D. And if we are wrong about this bet, it's going to hurt.
Let's talk about the people who have to execute that strategy, the execution model.
The old model is what Martin calls choiceless doers. It's the military model again. The CEO is the brain. The frontline worker is the hand. The brain does all the thinking and makes all the choices. The hand just does what it's told.
I don't pay you to think. I pay you to follow the procedure manual.
And this model absolutely destroys value. Martin tells this wonderful story about Mary, a bank teller he shadowed for a day. The bank's official procedure manual, written by the brains at headquarters, said, offer every single customer these 3 specific products. Be efficient. Move them along the line.
One-size-fits-all standardization.
But Mary was smart. She knew her customers. She saw that she had different types of customers coming to her window. She had the in-and-out business people who just wanted speed. She had the advice seekers who had a real financial problem. And she had the lonely seniors who were often just coming in for a bit of human contact.
So she adapted her approach.
She completely ignored the manual. For the lonely seniors, she took her time and chatted. For the busy people, she was speed and efficiency itself. For the advice seekers, she'd refer them to a loan officer. She was performing real-time market segmentation and customizing the service offering on the fly.
She was creating strategy right there at the front line. She was adding huge value.
Massive value. But when Martin pointed this out to her, he said, wow, you have a really sophisticated customer strategy. She froze. She got terrified. She said, oh no, please don't tell my boss I'm doing that. I'm just a teller. I'm not supposed to be making choices.
She had internalized the idea that she was just a choice. A choiceless doer.
And that is the tragedy of this model. The bank had thousands of Marys, all with this incredible real-time market intelligence, but the entire system was designed to silence them and turn them into robots. The new model Martin proposes is a choice cascade.
How does the choice cascade work?
It means that everyone in the organization is a strategist, just with a different scope. The CEO makes the broadest choice. We are going to be a high-service bank for small businesses. The regional manager then makes choices on how to apply that strategy to their specific region. The branch manager makes choices for their local branch, and Mary makes choices for the customer standing right in front of her.
So the choices get more specific and constrained as you go down the hierarchy, but everyone is still using their brain.
Everyone is empowered to think within their own box. It recognizes that execution is strategy. They aren't separate things.
Now, what about the very high-end talent? The creatives, the star software engineers, the top consultants. The typical model is to try and motivate them with money, stock options, big bonuses.
The idea is to align their incentives with the shareholders.
But Martin says that's a fundamental misreading of what motivates top talent. They aren't just looking for money, they're looking for a feeling of specialness.
They want to be treated as unique individuals, not as human capital or headcount. The story of Giles in the book illustrates this perfectly. Giles was a top-performing consultant at a big firm. He and his wife just had a baby, and he wanted to take 3 months of paternity leave.
Which, at the time, was not the company policy.
The official policy said no. Now, the standard fairness model of HR says, we have to treat everyone the same. If we make an exception for Giles, we have to do it for everyone, and we can't afford that.
That's the commodity labor mindset.
Yeah.
Every employee is a replaceable cog.
Right. But the leaders of the firm knew that Giles wasn't one exception. They actually went through the process of rewriting the official paternity leave policy for the entire firm, primarily to accommodate him.
That seems like a huge amount of work just for one person.
It was a signal. It was a hugely powerful signal. It told Giles, you are so valuable to us that we will literally change the rules of this entire corporation just to keep you. That level of validation and respect buys a form of loyalty that stock options can never, ever touch.
It reminds me of that old Van Halen story, the one about the brown M&Ms.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the perfect analogy. Everyone thinks Van Halen were just spoiled rock star divas for putting a clause in their concert contract demanding a bowl of M&Ms backstage with all the brown ones removed.
Rockstar excess.
But it was actually a brilliant safety test. Their stage show in the 80s was massive tons of heavy lights, complex rigging, pyrotechnics. The contract writer was hundreds of pages long. If they got to the dressing room and saw brown M&Ms in the bowl, it was an immediate red flag that the local promoter hadn't read the contract carefully.
So if they missed the M&M clause, they probably also missed the crucial safety specs for the pyrotechnics or the weight-bearing limits of the stage.
Exactly. For top talent, these little accommodations and signals of specialness aren't about the candy or the time off itself. They are a proxy. They answer the question, do you really see me? Do you value me enough to sweat the small stuff on my behalf?
Okay, two more big ones left. Innovation. Why do so many great innovative ideas fail when they get introduced into a company?
Because we focus 100% on the artifact.
The artifact being the thing itself. The shiny new gadget, the new app, the new software.
We obsess over the design and the features of the product, the artifact, and we completely forget to design the intervention.
The intervention being how the artifact is introduced to the world.
Exactly. You have to design the way the product enters the system just as carefully as you design the product itself. Martin talks about a company called Intercorp in Peru. They had a noble goal to build a new system of high-quality, affordable private schools called Innova Schools for the country's emerging middle class.
A great idea.
A fantastic artifact. But the middle class in Peru was deeply skeptical of corporate-run education. If Intercorp had just built a bunch of beautiful, modern school buildings, the artifacts, they likely would have stayed empty.
So what do they do instead?
They meticulously designed the intervention. They worked with the design firm, IDEO. They held community town halls. They involved parents in the design of the curriculum itself. They launched a national design competition for the school architecture. They spent as much time and energy designing the social acceptance of the schools as they did designing the schools themselves.
They prepared the soil before they tried to plant the seed.
That is a perfect way to put it. If you try to launch a radical new strategy inside your company without designing the intervention, without getting key stakeholders on board early, listening to their fears, making them part of the process, the organizational immune system will see it as a foreign body, attack it, and kill it, no matter how brilliant the artifact is.
Finally, let's talk about the place where money often goes to die in big companies. M&A, mergers and acquisitions.
The corporate graveyard. The failure rate of M&A is just astronomical. Something like 70 to 90% of deals fail to create any value. And it's because most companies operate with a taking mindset.
The idea that I'm going to buy this smaller company and just squeeze all the juice out of it.
Right. I'm going to fire the redundant staff, slash their costs, take their customer list, and add their cash flow to my bottom line. Martin says this almost always fails because you usually overpay in a bidding war, and then you completely destroy the unique culture and talent of the very thing you just bought.
So what's the winning model for M&A?
You have to give value in order to get value. You should only acquire a company if you, the acquirer, can offer them a unique superpower that they don't currently have.
What's an example of that?
Think about Google buying Android. When Google bought it, Android was a tiny, insignificant startup. Google didn't buy it for its existing cash flow. Google bought it and said, Here is our effectively infinite server infrastructure. Here are our world-class software engineers. Here is our global brand and reach. Now go be great.
They gave Android the superpowers it needed to take over the world.
They made Android fundamentally better than it ever could have been on its own. And because they gave that incredible value, they reaped the enormous reward of owning the world's dominant mobile operating system. The rule is simple. If you are looking at an acquisition and you cannot clearly articulate exactly what unique gift you are giving to the target company to make them more competitive, you should walk away from the deal.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a huge amount of ground. We've dismantled the standard models for competition, stakeholders, customers, strategy, data, culture, knowledge work, corporate functions, planning, execution, talent, innovation, and M&A.
It's a complete teardown and rebuild of the modern management brain.
It honestly feels a little overwhelming. If I'm a listener right now and I'm having the uncomfortable realization that I'm probably using 5 or 6 of these broken models, Where do I even begin to fix it?
You start with the most important concept of all, the idea of ownership. This is Roger Martin's final charge in the book.
Ownership.
You own your models, they do not own you. These frameworks we've talked about, strategic planning, shareholder value, stock-based compensation, they are just tools. They're like a screwdriver or hammer in your toolbox.
Okay.
If you are trying to turn a screw and you're banging on it with a hammer and it's not working, you don't keep banging it harder, you don't blame your hand for not being strong enough, you recognize you're using the wrong tool, you put down the hammer,
And you pick up the screwdriver.
you pick up a new tool that's better suited for the job. Martin's advice is, don't try to change all 14 models at once. You'll fail. Just pick one. Pick one model we talked about today that really resonated with you. Maybe it's the what would have to be true question for your next strategy meeting. Maybe it's the walk down the hall rule for dealing with team conflict.
Just start with one thing.
Just one. Try it tomorrow. Run the experiment. See if the new model works better than the old one. If it does, keep it. If not, try another one. But for the love of God, stop being insane. Stop doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Management is not a science of immutable laws. It is a practice of choosing the best tool for the job.
That's the quote that sums it all up. Now go audit your toolbox.
I think that is the perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. This was a dense one, but I think a really necessary one for anyone trying to navigate the modern world of work.
Absolutely. I'm a critical read.
For everyone listening, please check the show notes for a link to the book. It's called A New Way to Think by Roger L. Martin. It is well worth your time. We'll see you on the next deep dive.